Um, I promised I would keep my introductions brief. I've asked Copilot to help. Um, Copilot doesn't do brief, so I'm not going to use any of that. But what I will do is hand straight across to Peter Salvetti from Boston College. Peter is the Chief Technologist at Boston College, and he will be presenting on the exploration of generative AI for teaching, learning, administration, and operations. Over to you, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Salvetti here. Yeah, so couple of things. I don't have any slides to share with everyone, but I certainly get people to understand sort of our efforts. I'm sure, as everyone knows, generative AI is basically front and center everywhere in our universities or in our respective environments. And as an IT organization, Boston College is extremely centralized, which is both good and bad. We have our own data center, which is good, but in the face of AI, it's starting to look really bad because we have to meet with a lot of cloud vendors. But we have several efforts. Number one, from a teaching and learning perspective, IT has had a seat at the table with the University Council on Teaching to basically understand how to inculcate AI in teaching and learning and in research. And from that, it's been a fairly significant discussion. A report is due out this spring to the provost on how AI becomes a centerpiece of teaching and learning. To that end, we have multiple professors and multiple courses that are piloting bots, which I think is the path of least resistance right now, which is, take your syllabus, take your course content, and create some sort of assistive technology. This is not, retrieval augmented generation by any stretch. It's just a simple way to basically take a look at what's available and have students take a look at it. We have 3 courses right now piloting political science. One is a systems design class, and then one is my course in systems architecture, where it's assistive in the sense that it doesn't provide answers. It actually navigates students to sort of create sort of a narrative that then ultimately guides them gently, without providing any answers, to a solution that fits the content that's being taught. On the operational side, that's where it really gets interesting. Boston College, like most universities, is sort of kind of command and control. We have some sway on the administrative side. We have absolutely zero sway on the academic side. That sort of let all flowers bloom, which is good and bad. Number one. Number two, we really try not to get ahead of our skis with respect to pushing any solutions in the academic space. That being said, on the operational side, there were 3 opportunities for us to basically take a look at using AI. And there were actually 3 approaches, right? The first approach was ad hoc. Well, if something comes in, let's look at it, evaluate it on its merit, and use it. Unfortunately, with the ad hoc approach, there's no formal policies, there's no formal approach on use outside of security and technological use policies. And without that in place, we take a significant risk. We immediately jumped to embracing AI. And as such, we've had an effort for the last couple of weeks to determine and decipher where in the operational side we can use it. We've come up with 50 projects that was winnowed down to roughly about 25. We've now winnowed that down to 18. And instead of opting for 4 or 5 projects, we're going to do all 18. It's very, very short money. But the net is that we're going to phase these all in so that we're doing 3 at a time over a course of 3 to 4 months. But they touch on every single use case that I think we're familiar with: summarization, knowledge transfer, knowledge seek, and the like. So that's in line with our very, very conservative approach to these technologies. We don't like to be on the bleeding edge, but we certainly can't, keep a blind eye to any of this. David? Comments, questions, concerns?
Sorry about that. I was switching the lights on as the sun sets across the west of campus in Glasgow. We'll
Thank
take
you, Ronald.
questions at the end. So if you have questions, please hold on to them till then. But do feel free to throw anything into the chat as a reminder when we get there. And as you can tell, I'm now quickly looking for my notes, which I have here. Now, if only this was done by robots, it would be much smoother. There we are. Thank you, Peter. Moving on then to the University of Illinois, we have Chris Tidrick and Nick Vance talking around Generative AI Centre for Expertise. Chris and Nick, over to you.
Thanks, David. I am Chris Tidrick. I am the CIO at the Gies College of Business here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I'm also the chair of the Generative AI Center of Expertise that we launched last fall. I've been working with Nick, and Nick, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and then we can get into things?
Sure, yeah. I'm Nick Vance. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Central Technology Unit for the University of Illinois. And one of those strategic initiatives is generative AI.
Thanks, Nick. What we're going to talk about today is our Generative AI Center of Expertise, how we set that up and what the progress has been with it so far. It was launched last September. It was a joint charge between our university provost and the university CIO as a response to what we're all seeing is whether you see it as an existential threat or an opportunity of a lifetime, generative AI is here, and our university needed to respond to that. So we set up this Center of Expertise last September. And with the goal, with the objectives of, we wanted to have this expert advisory group to provide guidance and support to campus. And so we've brought together, right now, we are at over 50 contributors to the Center of Expertise. It started off relatively small, and then people were like, I want to be a part of this. And the energy around it has been amazing. The amount of time people are willing to put into this in short order has been really good. We did spend some time, as we do in academia, doing our kind of forming and norming over the course of the fall. But we did get a website launched where we have this sort of consolidated place where people can find information about generative AI and the resources on campus. But really now we're in the process of the rest of the objectives where we're mapping and working with stakeholders, governance related efforts, trying to get a handle on what's going on our campus, what those use cases are, and then shifting into let's develop some best practices around this. What we've really realized is there are a lot of people out there that are interested in this, but want guidance, need help, need support because this is such a new thing. And so in the next set of slides, we'll talk about what we're doing to kind of bring those best practices together. We've also been doing work around procurement pathways and looking at enterprise licensing. I think as all of you have probably realized, this stuff ain't cheap. And so we're trying to figure out how to best invest and make those procurement pathways as efficient as they possibly can. And then one last objective is really working with some of our technical folks to set up sandbox infrastructure that allow us to play around with these things in places where our university data and intellectual property is protected. So what have we done so far? Like I said, we launched the COE in September. One of the first things we did, because we are a Microsoft campus, all of our full-time faculty and staff have Microsoft A5 licensing, and Microsoft was about to release Copilot with data protection for anyone who had A5 licenses. And so we went through a vetting process with the COE in partnership with our campus privacy and security folks, and approved and launched Microsoft Copilot with data protection. For those of you who aren't familiar with that name, that's the rebranded Bing Chat Enterprise, which gives us kind of a gated community to use a kind of a general GPT tool. And so we have that's been up and running since November. We also then conducted a campus survey of generative AI familiarity use to gather information on use cases. We got over 1,200 responses to that, which was really good in a campus of our size to get that many responses. And you can see here the graph that you see there is kind of bell-shaped. That was the one where we asked how familiar are you with generative AI, and it's as you can see, the technology is still in its infancy as far as familiarity on campus. And most people are moderately familiar with it, but there are very few that are sort of extremely familiar with it. So we conducted that. We finished that up right after the Christmas holidays this year. And now we really are diving into the work of the COE. We have broken into 4 different working groups. We've broken those 50 people that I was talking about up into working groups to define use cases, best practices, determine whether we need any new policies, and then make investment recommendations. And so those groups are teaching and learning. There's another focused on research, another focused on administrative operations. And then we have one that's really looking at the infrastructure and technical capacity of our campus, looking at setting up sandbox environments, developing best practices around how we set things up with our campus cloud partners. We have existing relationships with Google, Microsoft, and AWS for cloud resources. And so we're looking into all of those different ways of building infrastructure for generative AI. And then one other big project, which I'll turn it over to Nick to talk about, is our review and testing of Copilot for Microsoft 365.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So just a little background on my role and connection to the COE. Our central IT unit recognized all of the great work that is happening in the COE and the excitement around it, and realized we needed to position ourselves better to respond to what the COE is doing, and the things that we saw that were coming, that were going to be asked from a enterprise perspective. We've had a lot of steering committees, groups, and things in the past that we were not prepared to respond to the needs of, that had come back with great recommendations. So we created the role that I'm doing and are working to organize our entire unit to be ready to respond and get the COE what it needs when they ask for things, and also bring new information to the COE for them to review as they are, as we are getting feedback from other areas around campus, which is one of the places that Microsoft Copilot 365 comes in. So we are working with Microsoft to buy about 500 licenses for Copilot 365 and run a early adopters group. We started out calling it Copilot Pilot, but that sounded silly. So we've gone to early adopters group is the name for it, to identify a wide swath of areas and groups around campus who are using Microsoft tools already, and who we can bring in, who are willing partners to come and test out Copilot 365. So we can assess how these tools really work and help the folks on campus accomplish their tasks, or maybe don't help them accomplish their tasks. So trying to really get a good evaluation of what are the areas, what are the benefits of integration into tools, what are the benefits of generative AI overall and helping people do their work, and what are the feelings and concerns towards it that those folks have. So we're looking at a 6-month time frame of giving them access to Copilot 365, following back up with them frequently, surveying them at the beginning and the end, and collecting data about how they're using it, to really try and evaluate, is this a good fit for us? Is it a good fit for certain areas and not others? And what's the profile look like, so we can responsibly spend the lots of money that Chris is talking about that it costs to deploy these tools, to get the best bang for our buck out of them.
All right, thanks, Nick. And then just one last note, if you want to learn more about our Generative AI Center of Expertise, you can go to genai.illinois.edu, find out more. We'll be posting updates and all kinds of information as we come along there, and happy to answer any questions after the other panelists. So I'll turn it back over to David. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Nick. I'm not sure if you were watching the heads, but I certainly saw lots of people nodding as the comment was made about the cost associated with licensing generative AI. On to Glasgow next. Not too far away from here, I would pass across to my colleagues Scott Ramsey and Andrew Struan. Over to you guys.
Great, thanks, Dave. Afternoon, morning, good evening, everybody. Scott and I are from, as Dave said, the University of Glasgow. I think we occupy a slightly different type of role from many of you here, in that we're not IT folks. We work with students, so we work directly in teaching students their kind of academic skills, digital literacies, academic literacies, and so on. But we've also been responsible for the development of our university's AI guidance for our student population. So we're going to talk today about what we're saying to students at the University of Glasgow, and some of our kind of rationale, some of our frameworks for the ways in which we're engaging with our students at undergraduate and postgraduate level, with their use of AI with regards to specifically academic integrity and academic misconduct. So we have approached this as a kind of institution-wide response. So our department has responsibility across all students at the University of Glasgow. So we've got about 38,000 students, and our department works with all of them. So we sit centrally within the institution. It was interesting, Peter, talking at the start about the centrally directed nature of Boston College. Glasgow is not that, and you'll see in a little bit some of the ways in which we've had to work around that approach. But what we've tried to do here is provide to our students a clear set of rationales and explanations as to the use of AI and why and where and when and how students should or should not use AI in their submissions. So this idea of this clarity of expectations for our student population, so that they understand what it is that we as the assessors are looking for them to be able to do, and show us that they are capable of doing. We are trying to promote then this solid bedrock of a framework for success, that allows students, again, to engage with the variety of AI tools, engage with the variety of digital tools that exist to them that can support their study, their research, their writing, but do that in a way that allows the students to still showcase their own human knowledge, human understanding, human critique. So this idea of this framework for success of engaging our students with the digital skills, digital literacies that are needed, but at the same time using that as a way to explain to them the rationale behind why some elements of use of AI tools, specifically Gen AI, we consider to be acceptable, and why others we would consider to be unacceptable. And so what we're trying to do is provide that institution-wide response for all of our students that embeds this good practice in the use of AI, recognizing that our students are graduating and will be graduating into a world dominated by AI. We are promoting the use of AI with ethical considerations, with academic integrity in mind, with a view of trying to upskill, in essence, our students in terms of their digital literacies, without having them wander into the world of academic misconduct through plagiarism, and whether intentional or not, because of uses of Gen AI, for example. And then what we're trying to do through this is kind of have a refresh of this approach to our understanding of academic misconduct and academic integrity through preemptive work with our students. And in lots of ways, the rise of AI has allowed us to kind of refresh the conversation that we're having with our students around about things like academic integrity, academic conduct, or academic misconduct, and placing an AI slant on this. So it was really interesting seeing the graph there from Illinois. We had done just a couple of weeks ago with our Students' Representative Council, a very similar thing, asking a whole bunch of students as to their familiarity with AI, and the graph that we got went almost exactly the same. Whole group of a bunch of folks in the middle saying, yeah, I think I kind of know what this is. And then the two camps at either end of students saying, I use this for absolutely everything in all cases whatsoever, and it is brilliant. And then students at the other end saying, I'm terrified of this and I have no idea what it is. What is it? What are you doing? How are other people using this? So it's nice seeing that kind of same spread. So our department's role then is to try and explain a lot of what it is that students ought to be doing when they're using AI, to make sure that they're using that with integrity, they're using it with a justification in mind, and they're using it with a clear understanding of why and where and how and when it might be useful. So what we have then is a framework which promotes this idea of student access to our policies and our procedures. So our department is tasked with essentially producing a whole bunch of student-friendly guidance, student-friendly information that is consistent in its wording as much as can be the case across an institution with very federalized structures, but with that clarity of responsibility for stakeholders, be that students, be that our individual colleges, our schools, our staff. And hopefully that this is all easily accessed so that students can again get access to this without barrier. So I'll pass over to Scott to talk about what we're doing.
So the university has all of the people who live in their offices and make decisions and set the policies, and then there's us who go out to translate all of this to the students. So our way of taking the PDFs that the students could access and bring them to their classes involves things like, well, first of all, we have a friendly looking student-facing website, which the link for which is at the bottom there, but we'll show you a couple of screenshots of that later. Our department also goes into classes to talk to students embedded within their degree modules. So the things that we try to say there are that between us and the subject areas, so when we say schools on this slide here, we're talking about the federated nature of our university. We have organizations that we refer to as schools. But the schools will decide on the level of AI that the students on those courses there are allowed to use, and that could be not at all, it could be in these specific ways which we will outline to you in your course information handbooks here, or it could be use it however you like, because we've designed the assessment in ways that we think it's not going to affect the integrity of that at all. So then once that decision has been made, we go off to students and try to impress upon them the principles of how they might use AI in an ethically, academically integrative way. If you could move on to the next one, please. So there are tools, and one of the messages that we're trying to get across is that there are tools beyond just generative AI. So if you're trying to do things like you can see in these 4 boxes here, like find academic literature, connect those pieces of literature and map the ideas that are published and how they're related to each other across different publications, or how ideas develop in the literature through time. Other tools to do things like cross-reference sources just based on whether they all cite the same authors. All of these have tools that are available that are not just generative AI. And the students' overarching role, which is to do the intellectual work on top. So curating the responses, checking for sense, checking for errors, synthesizing things, critiquing, taking a position, and ultimately, whatever they're doing, they're creating a piece of output that addresses the actual research question, which we'll all be familiar with how generative AI responses can kind of go off-piste. Because they're just synthesizing something that looks like what you wanted. So the student must take ownership of what they have submitted. We do this through, if you could go on to the next slide, please, by having setting a scene where the topic of AI use in their assignments is not verboten. We don't want to stigmatize it to the point where they feel like they must hide it if they've used AI. So we're trying to be very open with them to say these are the ways in which you could use it. Let's talk about why that might or might not be a good idea. We try to impress upon them from an ethics perspective that they should obtain permission to put any information in. So if they've got data sets that they want the AI to handle or survey responses, then that might go into training models. So there must be permission sought there. We are grappling, as everybody is, with the evolving landscape of what referencing means. So how do you attribute AI when it didn't just give you information and act as a source, but how do you explain that you gave it a paragraph and it turned it into a table for you? There's no academic convention for that, so we're trying to make sure the students do their best to explain what they did, which is related to the next point there, explain if AI is used. What a lot of our schools are asking is that any interaction between the student and an AI tool is kept a record of, so that if there's a misconduct case later, then that can be produced as evidence for how they got to the point of submitting what they submitted, and obviously being critical of the outputs, not just accepting what it says. So highlights, we try to tell the students that it must be acknowledged, and it's fine to use it if it's allowed by their school, must be acknowledged. They must critique and make sure that they're proud to submit everything and put their name to it. It's therefore not a replacement for their own work. And also, and was interesting when it came up to us at the first time, they should not be synthesizing artificial data sets with AI and then analyzing those as though that was original data, because although they might be doing the same task, we're building conclusions on a foundation of data that does not represent reality at all, which leads to research misconduct discussions.
So just for the last minute or so, what we're telling students then in our guidance is, in essence, key facts or key approaches that students should take around a set of do's and do nots. So things that students ought to do or can do or are welcome to do, and then a range of things that students should not do in order to not breach the our university's guidance on academic misconduct. We have tried to make this fit a whole variety of different subject and practice and local practices based around, as Scott was talking about, those kind of 3 levels of engagement with AI, which has been a challenge. So we've been working, for example, with our School of Mathematics and Statistics, who have a very particular software and technology that they want to use, but oftentimes it's not particularly reliable for them. And then we've also been working with our Scottish and English Literature department on the other hand, so the kind of entire other end of the spectrum, to promote ethical use of AI in classic essay style assessments. So we've tried to explain this in a way that kind of encapsulates all of this for our students. And we're also building a range of courses for our students to undertake that will enable them to engage with this kind of the ethical underpinnings of use of AI. So we have coming up pretty soon a new MOOC run by our department on ethical use of AI in study and in research. So that'll be launching in the summer. And what we're trying to do here is explain to students where they can, where they can't use AI, why they can, why they can't, and give them that rationale, that explanation for why we as an institution are saying yes in this case and no in that case, so that students have a grasp of what it is we are trying to do as an institution and why we are saying the things that we are saying. So all of this then ties together into this need, in our case, for this cross-institutional collaboration where you have different schools, in our case, going off and doing very radically different things. From our point in the centre, that can be quite a challenge. So collaboration is crucial here. And this ongoing information for our students, that this ongoing open discussion between us and our students about what they are doing, how they are using the tools, why they are using them, and then our expectations at the other end of, well, what does this actually look like in terms of their assessments is crucial here. We had a discussion just earlier today at one of our teaching excellence networks where somebody said, did the university not just go too fast in saying, yeah, you can use AI? And our response at that was to say, well, A, we had no choice. This exists whether we want it to or not. But B, crucially, if we had said to students, no, thou shalt not use AI, they will be using it anyway. They will be lying to us about the fact that they are using it. And then from our perspective, we're then de-skilling them in not giving them opportunity to engage with this tech that will be so prevalent in their world of work. So my response to that was a little bit short in terms of, no, I don't think we did go too fast. But all of this requires this institution-wide response so that the institution is able to keep up as much as we can with what our students are doing, so that conversation is kept open, honest, and frank between us and our student body. So that's us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew and Scott. That's a really interesting presentation, and top marks for coordinating your black shirt and white shirt outfits. I think that works really well and should be taken as a standard for future presentations. Moving then 3,559 miles from Glasgow to Virginia, I'm going to pass across to Josh to talk about research and AI.
Hi there, I'm Josh Fowler. I'm the Associate VP for Research Computing here at the University of Virginia. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the various ways, particular the GPT type AI isn't finding its way into research right now, but where we're looking to go forward with that. So I think the one thing I just want to start out by saying is that the University of Virginia is focused on does have a group that has been formed to evaluate the resources and approach that we're taking for research or AI in the research space. That committee report hasn't come out yet. And so I am somewhat preempting some of the things they're talking about here. But that is, sorry, pop up. That's a space that there'll be more for us to report in the future. But the way I tend to think about this is that there are, well, first of all, that research as a field, as a place that people are working with AI, has really been in the AI space for a good 6 to 8 years. So we have been building, for instance, supercomputers with the idea that they need to support AI workloads and research on new AI workloads throughout that time. The new outcome over the last couple of years has been in the GPT space and transformers as a tool to really change where the AI applications can be applied. But we start to look at what type of workloads we see right now. And in the research space, we see enormous amounts of AI used for image segmentation, natural language processing, object identification in video or other sources. We see direct research on the large language models in transformers. But at the moment, we're seeing relatively little use of these tools as a way to directly facilitate research. And then, of course, we're seeing lots of research into the questions of the ethics of these tools or investigating how use of these tools may influence outcomes in various spaces. But I think for a variety of reasons, as a new technology, there's a big hesitancy to really integrate this into research workflows if it might be viewed as unreliable. And I think the comment earlier about, having to tell people don't use this to generate synthetic data sets is a great example of where people have some concerns about what could happen in the research space. Where we are having lots of discussion, though, is around the actual process of doing research. So you call this research administration, you could call it, research development, perhaps at a university. But I think there are a lot of spaces where we see large language models and tools like ChatGPT as a way to accelerate the ability of our researchers to do everything that surrounds the actual act of being in a lab or being at a computer directly doing research. There's effectively paperwork involved, and there's a lot of ways that people can see ChatGPT addressing that. So just in some discussions I've been in recently here, this includes things like providing interfaces for people to learn more information about the resources that are available within the university. But even as we got into some of these discussions, I've also identified other areas of AI outside of the GPT space that probably are more relevant immediately. Uses of natural language processing for digging through large piles of submitted proposals to find commonalities. And I think when I look at this, what I really see is a reoccurrence of a discussion that I've seen for 10 plus years within the university environment about how do we enable people to enable researchers and PIs to connect with one another and with the resources that a university offers to optimize their work. And, I think the big push, let's say 5 to 6 years ago, was in the research information management systems as a way to act sort of like a social network for people to connect on various papers and tools. And always the big challenge with this was, how do you actually get good data into these systems to enable people to then search upon it? And then for the implementations of these I've seen, and there's a good number of commercial tools out there. I think there's Profiles, which was actually a Harvard Catalyst product, that all were working in the space to further these connections. But even when these tools are available and they're populated with good information and people are able to continue making sure that the information is updated, I think there's been real challenges for researchers to convert this information into actionable results. And where I'm seeing the use of, well, where I'm seeing the use of more classical AI techniques and a lot of interest in that is in the population side of these types of systems. What can we do to parse large data sets in natural language, summarize them, and get them input into a tool or some sort of repository so that it isn't keyword searches or manual review, or unfortunately asking PIs to summarize it on their own, right, where you tend to get complaints. And then once you have those data repositories, talking about as next steps, what can we do to make it so that the presentation of this data is more fluid and that more responsive to the exact type of questions that principal investigators want to ask, rather than it simply being a large collection of graphs and charts that people have to interpret on their own. And so that's the space where we're having a lot of discussions about, or this, I should rephrase that. The discussions are just starting about how can we take this pile of information that some of it already exists, some of it we're hoping to build, and turn that into something like a chatbot that can be responsive to questions like, I need this for my grant or my proposal. Where can I find this on campus? What centers or cores or institutes may have these resources available? I need bridge funding. What are funding sources that are available within the university that can address this need? I do research in this particular area. I tend to work with this funding agency. What funding agencies beyond this one may be interested in the type of proposals I'm interested in writing? And so I think, notes here, just lost my page. And then on top of that, you know, I am interested in doing this type of work, but I have this little chunk of expertise that is missing. Who can I find either on my own campus or on other campuses that has a history of working in this space and would be a strong collaborator for me to move this project forward? All of those, I think, are questions for those of us that have worked in the research space. You can hear people asking those questions. And there is a lot of potential for tools that can act in a respond to more natural questions to provide better responses and more, well, to basically respond more like a person would but the issue we have right now is we have things like our research development office, but those can't scale to the sheer amount of research that we expect to do across campus. So I think I'm going to leave it there so we can stay on time.
Thank you, Joshua. That's really, really interesting. Staying in Virginia, I'm going to pass across to Dave. Over to you, Dave.
All right, well, thanks, David. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yes, you passed about 5 feet away. Josh is in the next room over for me, I just realized.
I was guessing based on the background, yeah.
So we're really close. Well, thanks for everybody being here. What a great group, and good to see colleagues from around the world. As Josh was saying, there is at the university, there is a committee on the research side that's looking into generative AI. There are 2 other committees here. One is around teaching and learning. The other is around administrative work. And of course, Josh mentioned research. So we think of ourselves in those 3 ways: teaching and learning, administrative, and research. And since Josh covered the research piece of this, I'll talk a little bit about teaching and learning to start. They got to start about this time last year with a committee that they put together. They really wanted to get in front of it. They wanted to look at things that some have mentioned before me, like AI literacy for students, AI literacy for faculty. What does this look like as we use it in the classroom? And one of the outcomes of that was a report which you can Google and you can find online. And as we were, as a teaching and learning community, thinking about, okay, well, we want data, we want AI literacy. How do we go about doing that? What kind of tools can we provide to the students and to the faculty to enable them to do this? Then how can we do that in a way that doesn't require students or faculty to give up a name or a phone number that doesn't require them to pay money, so we can have equitable access for all students. And how do we do this in a way that we can protect the university's data? And so I'm going to pull up a slide here. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of our journey here in terms of the tools that we are offering. This is not a roadmap. I'll use air quotes with the word roadmap. This is actually more of a mind map, if you will, about where things are headed. And so in response to that teaching and learning ask around equitable access to enterprise ChatGPT, we started to develop in-house our own enterprise ChatGPT, which we call UVA Chat Plus. We got on that pretty early. We started late in the summer in building that. That's built on, we were a Microsoft shop as well, like University of Illinois. And so we built that on top of Microsoft Azure OpenAI, and we built a custom front end for it. We started to build that, and then lo and behold, Microsoft came out with Copilot in December. And so Copilot came out, it was available for faculty and staff. Then we launched UVA Chat Plus in January. That product is in pilot with our undergraduate school of business right now. And the reason it's in pilot is, one, we just want to make sure it has the features and the functions that people expect. And number two, we were very, very concerned about cost. You've heard that. UVA Chat Plus is built on a usage model. And so we pay for the tokens. So we pay for the prompts and responses. And so we were like, we don't know what this is going to look like. This could be super popular. We could sink ourselves in all of this. And so we wanted to take a more cautious approach. And so we're piloting through the spring semester. And then Microsoft came out with Copilot for Students in February of 2024. So all our faculty, staff, and students now have Microsoft Copilot available to them. The nice thing about all two of those services that we provide is they do have data protections because of our contract and relationship with Microsoft. The one thing you can't do is put highly sensitive data in these tools, but you can put anything that's sensitive or public in our terms inside of these tools as prompts. What we're working on, sounds like in parallel with Illinois, we're working on M365 Copilot. They're a little bit ahead of us. We're just getting started. We're going to be doing a readiness assessment with Microsoft. We're going to be doing some piloting this spring with faculty and staff, and then do a rollout to faculty and staff. And then we'll see about students. Again, that's another funding issue. Again, going back to cost of all of this. In terms of things that are floating in the air and that we're thinking about doing, Josh mentioned one. It relates to retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, as you'll hear it called. This is what I call bring your own content. So a lot of people want to take these natural language models and these ChatGPTs, and they want to hook them up to content that they already have. It could be research material, it could be course material. You could reach inside your learning management system and pull this information out, and then students could ask natural language questions. So that's a space that we are starting to delve into. Flipping down to the bottom of the slide, keeping track of all of these applications that are promising AI built in. Zoom certainly has it, and we have it available to us. We have not turned it on yet because we want to pilot that and see what that looks like. But Canvas, Qualtrics, any number of applications are going to come out with their own built-in AI. And so there's a question there of, do we build things or do we wait for the application to come out with the AI? And then last, I would mention, which is sort of a bit of a glimmer in our eye, is this idea that as a central IT organization, we are very decentralized here at UVA. As a central IT organization, perhaps we could provide a service of an OpenAI API that the technologists in the schools and other areas around grounds could plug into. So those are ideas that we have. And so going from sort of the strategy and the products, I also wanted to share with you, and I put the link in the chat here. This is our services page. So the products that are available that I just mentioned to you are on this page. And there are a couple of other things that I wanted to point out quickly to you. Let me go ahead and share this page. Excuse me while I scroll to the top. So this is our information. Again, I provided the link. You can find information about UVA Copilot, UVA Chat Plus. But I did also want to call attention to the middle section here. We have created some responsible use guidelines in terms of use for the services that we provide. Some of these are similar to what our friends at Glasgow were talking about, but ours are not specifically for students. They're for anybody that uses the tools that we have. And so you can take a look at these. One of the most interesting things we've found, and we found talking to other schools, is if you have policies, if you have good IT policies today that govern your systems, things around acceptable use, around records management, privacy, those kinds of things, there's good news. Those things still apply to the generative AI world. We're actually only making tweaks to like 3 of our policies, and these are really tweaks. We're not going to go back and regenerate policies. We don't see the need for a Gen AI policy. We have the things in place, and so that's good news for those who are going to be doing this work as well. I talked a little bit about the data protection standards and how you can't use highly sensitive data in these tools, but you certainly can use others. If you are not using a UVA tool, you are on your own. And the liability is yours, so we make sure we're clear on that. I'll skip over a little bit. We talk about being transparent as well, not as in detail as Glasgow. I love what you guys have done there. We do talk about, though, hey, if you're going to use these things, make sure, one, it's appropriate to use it in these circumstances, and 2, if you do use it, just make it known that that's what you've used. And then lastly, I call your attention to the terms of use, and you can borrow these from us if you like. These are written by the General Counsel's Office. I'm not a lawyer, so I appreciate all that is written here, but I'm not going to do the legalese stuff. I think that there are some interesting things here to call out, though. Under our permitted and prohibited uses, when can you use the tools that we're providing? We are basically saying you can use these tools for UVA teaching, learning, research, UVA work, but please don't use these for personal use, maybe other than what happens incidentally. We also talk about an interesting thing here under legal and compliance. You may use these tools for administrative purposes, but they should not be used for personnel decision-making purposes. We want to keep the human interactions human. And when we deal with HR, those are human interactions. Lastly, and I think sort of fun, is the warranty here. You have to read this in detail, but it basically tells you what it says. It basically says Gen AI tools may produce erroneous and nonsensical stuff, and the results that are not real. So we don't warranty anything that comes out of these tools. And so it's important that we mention that. So again, this is, sorry to scroll there on you. If you want to go back, you've got the link. You can take a look at these pages and certainly reach out. We've got an email on here if you want to reach out with any questions. Thanks,
Thank you,
David.
Dave. Thank you. And thank you for sharing the link. Linda has also shared a link back to some resources from Virginia. And if anyone hasn't seen it, colleagues from Glasgow have shared a link to the page that they were referencing. On to our final speaker now, Eric Kenny from Harvard. While Eric's presenting, if there are questions that you want to fire into the chat, Linda and Deborah will pick those up after, or if you just want to put your hand up, get your finger ready on the raise hand button, but I will pass across to Eric just now. Thank you.
Hello, thanks. My name is Eric Kenny. I work on the network architecture team at Harvard University. So I am by no means an AI expert, except for accidentally. Anyways, I was involved in exploring and adapting some AI technologies at the university, and sounds like many of you are on similar journeys at your own institutions. Over the past year at Harvard University IT, or Hewitt, the team has been piloting various AI tools to improve information access, automate some processes, and enhance services. So I was going to walk through some of our experiences, the considerations we made, what worked well, where we struggled, and some recommendations, so you can hopefully learn from our journey. 448 days ago, ChatGPT was released to the public. Yes, that is an AI generated image of that event, because why not? My background in AI started 400 days ago. I began discovering how useful this technology is, different use cases for it, and that it was going to change the world, much like the internet did for my industry in networking. So Harvard University has this program called the Emerging Technology and Innovation Program, where any staff member can submit a proposal for consideration. And by the time proposals were due, I had already been using ChatGPT daily for around 2 months, and I knew generative AI should be in this in some way, but there's so many ways to use it. Which one do you choose? Fortunately, there were some others with some similar plans, and we came together with a proposal. So 327 days ago, we submitted an idea to create AI answers from any repository, basically a chatbot that we would pilot for human resources. So the plan was, the HR website has tons of great content on the public information. I can't stress that enough. This is the public content. But if you wanted to find stuff, you had to search for it. You have to navigate through pages, and that's great. But the plan was to build an AI chatbot that made it easier for people to get information tailored to their specific questions about HR-related topics. So we compared service offerings from OpenAI and Microsoft's implementation of OpenAI, and built a chatbot website to interact with this data. So this involved creating some drop-in solutions that others could leverage in their projects, and learn some lessons along the way about best practices, costs, challenges, performance, and scalability. And it's amazing to me how far AI technologies have come in such a short period of time. To think that the work that we did on this project just last year is already so antiquated, and what took us a few months to build from scratch can now be done in seconds. But more on that later. Just in case you're curious, this is a pre-recorded demo of the thing we built. Start off with some simple questions about if we have Martin Luther King Day off, and this has a built-in conversational memory to facilitate follow-up questions. The source of the information is provided, so you can reference that. Multiple sources can be leveraged to provide a single answer, which is pretty cool. And the conversational memory does come into play in this example, where you can ask follow-up questions, and even use the additional intelligence of generative AI to take advantage of more complex tasks, like asking for the dates in a specific format. The outcome of the pilot was that we established some framework for scalable and flexible implementations of this technology. We built tools for data ingestion. We built the web interface, a quality assurance mechanism like thumbs up, thumbs down, to ensure the tool could provide meaningful answers. The proof of concept that we brought to life had actually worked, which was surprising. Well, most of the time it worked, but lots of departments wanted this tool or something like it to use with their own data. So if we took some of those lessons, and I know people have been saying that it's not cheap, but it was way cheaper than we thought it was going to be. And the other lessons that we learned was that the tools change really fast and things break often. So a lot of the frameworks like LangChain, there were so many changes going on that it was really hard to keep up. And basically to be able to do some of the functionality, we had to go into the code and look at what it was actually doing because the documentation was just so out of date already. And some of the other things we learned was you're never going to get 100% accuracy. So that was difficult to deal with because a lot of these things you definitely want to have accurate information coming out of it. But while we were developing this pilot, a new framework was introduced called Chainlit. And what Chainlit is, this came out 283 days ago. It's a framework that provides the ability to integrate LangChain as a conversational AI chatbot. And we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and none of us had any proper UI design experience. So moving forward, we recommended using Chainlit for the front end, and then we took the back end code that we developed, ported that over to work via a Chainlit framework. So after the pilot concluded in late July, an ambitious task force was assembled by our university CIO to have a production-ready Chainlit implementation with single sign-on via SAML, integration with multiple large language models available for people across the campus to use by September 1st. So that was a pretty ambitious goal, and it happened. We knew that people were going to use generative AI, and we wanted to create a safe environment for people to experiment. Just prior to that, in mid-July, there were initial guidelines for the use of generative AI released. And the key takeaways of those, you can read about it here, but the key takeaways are that you need to protect confidential data. You need to review the content that you create and submit, and you don't want to compromise academic integrity. So these are all very important things, and it's good to have some kind of guidance to go by and give people some information about all this new stuff coming out. And part of this also established an AI community of practice at the university, which a lot of members are a part of and can learn about new things going on. 107 days ago, OpenAI released GPTs, which is a custom version of ChatGPT that combines instructions and extra knowledge and any combination of skills, really. This is kind of like a new era of personalization in ease of use, in AI tools, opening up possibilities for further innovation and customization across the field. Anyone now can, with a ChatGPT Plus or Enterprise account, could create their own chatbot easily and share it with others. Some of the key takeaways of this: basically expect constant change and build flexibility into your systems. Like I said, this stuff changes so fast, it's almost a full-time job to keep up with it. You want to start small, iterate quickly, don't overinvest upfront before proving the value of it, and focus on simple, repetitive tasks, maintenance schedules, question answer, all those kinds of different things. But keep humans in the loop for relationship building, complex tasks, all those kinds of things. Make sure there's a human in the loop there. And the accuracy, again, is a concern. You got to make sure that you're on top of that. So all these kinds of things are things that we discovered along the way, and hopefully I didn't bore you too much about this. Hopefully you learned something. What I'd say is that the future of AI in education is not just about adopting technology, but it's about adapting our mindset to be able to harness its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. That's a really good point to close the presentations on. While we continue the discussion with some questions and answers, I will pass across to Linda and Deborah, who are going to host that part of it. But before I switch my microphone off, I would just like to thank all of our speakers for a fantastic presentations. It's really interesting range of use cases and scenarios and issues that we've been talking about. And I think shows the complexity and the breadth of issue within higher education and across learning and teaching, research and administration in our institutions. So thank you all very much for that. And a personal thank you to Deirdre and Ronald for helping set up this first conversation. I hope it's the first of many. But thank you to everyone who's helped set that up and to everyone who's presented. But with that, I will pass across to Linda and Deborah to take care of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question we got, panelists, was about training. Any training offered on AI prompting / querying as an extension of good search research skills? Thoughts on AI training?
So that's one of the pieces that the University Council on Teaching has actually undertaken internally. Is there's a vocational aspect that we're trying to make sure that is well spelled out. I think as was just indicated here, we believe that maybe prompt engineer, that job description doesn't exist beyond the next year and a half, but we do believe that having skills in asking the question is important. So we're looking at several different frameworks to which apply some of that learning across campus.
Thanks. Deirdre, not to put you on the spot, but I know you have competencies with the T-shaped IT professional at Harvard. Are you thinking about adding AI skills into that at all in terms of training?
Yeah, so I know Linda shared some LinkedIn Learning courses in the chat. We've been leveraging LinkedIn Learning. I think as folks have brought up, just AI in this space has been changing rapidly, and I think we're still figuring out our strategy, but we are working on what I call now phase 2 of our AI learning plan, beyond just aggregating training. What do we really need to know? So I do think that's on the horizon for us, whether it be just training outside of LinkedIn Learning with a vendor or something that we create in-house based on common Harvard use cases.
Thank you.
I would add to that at Illinois, we are looking at, we've asked the working groups in the Center of Expertise to not only be looking at tools we should invest in, but looking at training we should invest in, because these tools, they're so powerful, but if you do not know how to use them, they can actually do more harm than good. And so the training investment on this is, I think we need to be really serious about.
Thank you, Chris. And participants, please feel free to raise your hand to ask a question or to pop a question into the chat and I will ask it for you. In the meantime, while you're thinking of your questions, a question for Dave Streit. When enabling students for Copilot, did you also enable it for students under 18, or was that a concern or discussion?
That's a great question. So when we were originally talking with Microsoft about rolling out Copilot, Microsoft did have the requirement that students under the age of 18 would not be able to access it. And so they actually built some tools to allow us to identify those students. And so we were starting down this path with our identity and access management team to figure this out. The good news is that Microsoft lifted that. Like it's the day before they turned on our Copilot and our tenant. And so it's not a concern. What they did is they have like an admin wide configuration now, and you can say, you're a K through 12 institution or you're a higher ed institution. And if you're higher ed, then your students can get access to Copilot through their licensing. And so maybe there's a question behind the question there, which is, are we concerned about that? I will say we actually had the opposite concern, was that if you're in a classroom, we have 800 students who are under the age of 18. We were more concerned that you might be in a class with, and you're 17, person next to you is 18, there's some kind of assignment and you don't have access to it. That was actually our bigger concern. We wanted to make sure all of our enrolled students had access.
There was a follow-up that said, okay, but if you have dual credit students, are we able to turn it off for our under 18 learners?
So we are, that's an interesting question. We are not offering dual credit. Our community colleges tend to offer those kinds of things to our high school students and younger students. So I don't believe that's a big issue for us. But if you do have dual learners, that's a really interesting question.
There was a comment about security, privacy, and safety in the use of GenAI and what one group is doing in terms of an observability platform. Can our panelists talk a little bit about the security and privacy challenges that you've encountered?
Yeah, so Harvard has data classifications like level 1 through 5, 1 being public information and, 4 and 5 being like really, really sensitive information. And the guidance that was put forth said, if you're doing GPT, generative AI on your own platform or somebody else's platform, level 1 is okay, but don't put in anything else. And then for the sandbox, we okayed data up to level 3. So it's challenging to tell people, don't put in sensitive information in there. You kind of just have to trust that they're going to know what sensitive information is and not put it in there. And that, maybe you can obfuscate or find Harvard replaced with university, and, those types of things to kind of anonymize some of that data.
Thank you, Eric. Other thoughts from our other panelists on privacy and security?
So I think for the research administration, research development use cases, there's already a lot of discussion about the fact that even internally to the university, only with, for instance, faculty members having access to a tool, there's certain information that we want summarized for inclusion into some of these tools, but that there would be a much narrower group of people that should have access to the contents of certain types of grant applications or the terms of philanthropic gifts or any number of things that we still want from a higher level visibility standpoint for people to query into that information. And so that's an unsolved problem. There are things with RAG that you can have it, for instance, in the Microsoft environment, have it be tied to the access requirements. But then we are also going to need to set up some sort of tiered set of documents that represent subsequent levels of summarization to make sure that information is available to individuals that need the summary and won't potentially leak out if we were to include the true raw data.
Thank you. So several presenters referred to accessibility in terms of tool cost and availability, in particular for the front-end development and use of existing components. Have you tested these interfaces for accessibility in terms of user-assistive devices? For example, Zoom text, text-to-speech, screen reader, voice controls, being able to utilize them.
I can talk to that a little bit. In terms of Chainlit, the framework, that was one of the challenges that I actually didn't mention, was that the digital accessibility portion of that was quite challenging. it didn't really conform to a lot of the screen readers and alt text and all those little components that you have to be aware of. And because it's a framework, it's difficult to modify it to be more accessible. So there are challenges with that for sure.
So UVA, I mentioned, so we have Copilot, and we have not done accessibility testing on Copilot. Tiffany, I might take you up on an offer to help with that. But in terms of UVA Chat Plus, which is the one we built in-house, accessibility was a requirement. And I will say it probably took us an additional 2 or 3 weeks to launch the tool because we were doing accessibility testing and we were making changes to make sure it was accessible. Now that tool only does text prompts and responses. So in terms of what it can do AI-wise, it's a bit limited. But that also allows us to produce something that is a little more accessible.
Thank you. For the Glasgow presenters, you had a slide about the students' role in finding literature, mapping ideas, citation, summarizing. Are you giving specific advice around tools for the students, and how are you teaching them to approach these topics specifically?
I'll jump in first, Scott, and then I'll hand over to you for the specifics, if that's okay. So the short answer for this is yes, absolutely. We have for a long time been teaching students elements of essential digital literacies. So the types of tools that students can use to enhance their study, enhance their research. And so we are giving specific advice around about different pieces of tech. And so Scott's slide with that, the kind of the different types of AI tools, not just Gen AI, that can be used, we'll discuss in some depth and some detail with students. And the rationale for that, again, is that, as I said before, was that our students will be using these types of things anyway. We may as well give them the best chance, the best skills with how to actually interact with them. But the approach that we try to take with this is to explain to the students the role that they have to take in their research process, the role that they have to take in their study process, and the ways in which tools can aid that. So in terms of the approach, the tools and the topic specifically, we break that down very much into specific subject areas and specific subject style approaches. So Scott's team, for example, have a whole bunch of mathematicians and statisticians in it, and they have been teaching students how to use specific tools, AI tools in maths and stats. And the approaches that you can take specifically within that area. So one of the challenges we've found with this has been getting that the kind of the breadth of knowledge around about the different tools that are available, but then also the specific details of tools that apply in specific circumstances and in certain ways. So it's that kind of breadth and depth challenge has required effort from our part. Scott, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I think all I'll add to it then is that what we've been doing, or what one of our colleagues who's not here, but what we've done, delivered presentations with her about, for her to describe, is I shall show some of the tools like Research Rabbit or Elicit, or just some of the other tools that are out there for researchers specifically, to disabuse students of the notion that just because you can go to a generative AI tool and get a response to anything that you type in, that's necessarily therefore the best tool for the job because it's so versatile. It's actually not going to be all that great at doing anything other than talking back to you. So very cognizant of the fact that those tools themselves will probably go out of date, but hopefully the message the students go away with is, there are various flavors of AI.
Thank you. Regarding supporting students, faculty, and staff as end users and consumers of AI tools, have you observed any trends or new support approaches that are unique to the new tools?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes, anyone?
So trends that are unique, I think I would say for us so far, no. We've seen, again, to go back to what Chris had spoken about with that kind of bar chart of engagement with tech. We've kind of seen a continuation of some students jumping in, being very willing, very capable, very eager to engage, some being spectacularly reluctant to engage, and then the vast majority kind of in the middle, unsure of the extent of what can be done, what should be done. And so I think for us, there hasn't really been a change specifically because of AI. That's kind of always been the pattern for us. I think probably what has changed most for us has been awareness of the fact that now so many of these types of tools, Gen AI and other AI tools exist, that more students are aware of them. But I don't think we're seeing, and maybe Scott will disagree with me on this, but I don't think we're seeing a vast change in terms of students speaking with us and coming to us for advice on what and how to do it in a way that they wouldn't have done 10 years ago with Google Scholar, for example. I think it seems I think to be occupying a very similar kind of pattern and trend.
Thanks. Scott?
So I see a vast change. No, just kidding. I don't see a vast change, but I do notice that the biggest thing that gives me concern, so to take the wording of the question, regarding supporting students, faculty and staff, have you observed any new support approaches that are unique to the new tools? I think what's required is a whole lot of publicity, PR, around the fact that generative AI is probabilistic. We've noticed it in our own colleagues who we might have assumed would have known better, that they see things like ChatGPT as databases that are full of information that you can go and consult. And although they know that hallucinations happen, they haven't quite made the connection that all it's doing is predicting the most likely next word in the line. And I've seen some in the last couple of weeks be surprised when we talk to them about how if you ask the same question multiple times, you're not going to get a verbatim answer that is the same every time. So I think getting the staff to be literate on how the tools work before we can then rely on them to go out to all of the many, if you think of the trickle-down structure of the hierarchy of the institution, before we can rely on them to safely talk to the students about how these tools work and what you should be aware of. I think that for institutions is one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I think to build on what Scott was just saying, I mean, one of the things that I think is really unique about this is that our staff that are used to supporting our users, they're not experts in this in any way, shape, or form, right? This is all really new to them as well. So there's not the confidence to go in and help somebody with it. And on top of that, and I don't know if many of you have seen this, but I know on our team, we have some folks that have like real ethical problems with these tools. And so they're not as enthusiastic about the new technology as we normally would be with like a new software that comes out or something like that. And so there's all this in the heads of our support staff. There's this, I don't really know how this works, and I'm not even sure this is a good thing for the world. And so we've got to really be cognizant of that as we're supporting our users, because there are some of our users that are way ahead of us on the use of this.
Thank you. I love that. So we have about 5 minutes left. I would love it if all of our attendees could put into the chat one thing that you took away from the session today. So if you chat one thing that you took away from the session, we'd really appreciate that. And to start to wrap us up, for each of our panelists, I would love it if each of you would respond. If you could imagine that you can see into the future, maybe 5 years, let's say sort of immediate future, 5 years. What do you see as the impact on your schools, universities, colleges of AI in 5 years? What would look different? What's going to be different?
I would say it is absolutely the way we assess students. I think this, if it does nothing, it should get us to a place where we shouldn't be assessing students on something that an AI chatbot could answer itself. So we really need to be thinking about how students learn and how we assess that learning and how we assess competency. I think that's, if that hasn't changed, this may be the existential crisis that we think it is.
Thank you.
I would say, we have a pretty extensive knowledge base built into our ServiceNow platform. And I would say in 5 years, most of that content would probably be in some form of self-help question answer bot that might be able to, handle requests and incidents in a manner that would be more efficient for everybody. I think some of the stats that I've seen say most people go and search the knowledge base for what they're trying to do first before creating a ticket. So, in 5 years' time, maybe we'll have less tickets.
Mine was kind of similar to Eric, so I'll bounce off of his, which maybe mine is a little bit more of a dream for our 5-year window. But the thing that I really see is an expansion on kind of what Eric was saying, which is integration of help and customer service for our students. We have a web of different offices all across our campus that all do different things that students have to try and figure out which one they're supposed to go to do these different tasks, and taking generative AI to bring that information together and help the students get an answer to their question, or at least get the correct guidance as to who to go and talk to for their question faster and in a way that's integrated into their normal workflow instead of kind of a new adventure across campus every time they have a problem.
And I think that's the same answer for research, honestly. It's the same basic concept. It's just more geared at our faculty than at the students.
It's amazing, actually. Plus one on what everybody's saying, especially what Nick said. I mean, we've actually been talking about that. Like, can you imagine this especially in a very large R1 decentralized institution? You can imagine students are having to go all kinds of different places to find information. And we've always had this idea that maybe we could have one help desk, but we have separate knowledge bases on. Anyway, I think Gen AI can help us overcome these separate knowledge bases that we have, and give our students one place to go. And then I will tell you, all of you on this call, your lives will be different in 5 years. If you get things like M365 Copilot, productivity will, I don't know by what magnitude, but productivity will definitely increase per person.
I think from us, I would probably echo Chris and saying, looking at assessment, I think the big change for us is all about how we assess and crucially what it is we are assessing. So there's kind of human components of knowledge critique, knowledge generation, and how we disentangle the human component from assessments from the non-human component. So I think the big change for us would be that assessment practice.
So interesting. Thank you all very much. On behalf of HELD, I want to thank everyone who attended today, all of our panelists. Deirdre, do you have anything that you want to add in closing?
Just thank you everyone for your participation, and to just echo the thanks to our panelists for taking the time today, and all the members of HELD for helping us out. And we look forward to perhaps doing this again with all of our universities. So stay tuned. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we will be sharing the recording. So we'll work with all the representatives from the various institutions and make sure the information gets out to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.